Hello and welcome to Mental Health Hour with Dr. Tapo. Welcome to Love Bay Radio. I hope you're doing well. Here in Canada, I think I've said this before, February is Black History Month, where we celebrate all things Black and beautiful. And we're in the last week of Black History Month, but it's been a really wonderful month. There's just something, I won't say magical, definitely affirming about Black History Month when you are a Black person here in Canada. So it's been great this month of February, celebrating each other, celebrating where we come from, what we've come from, where we're going, and where we are as well. We have to, as much as we can, remember the past and celebrate it and mourn it and look forward to the future, plan it and drive for it. We also have to take time to enjoy the present. Where are we today? What's happening today? How can we affirm and celebrate each other today? So happy Black History Month to those of you in North America. So it's not just Canada, it's North America. I hope if you're Black like me, you've had a wonderful Black History Month. And I'm always looking forward to next year. It's like, to me, it's Christmas and Black History Month. Give me Christmas and Black History Month. Those are the two things I look forward to every year. Here on Love Bay Radio, we love to hear from you. So please get in touch. You can email us infolovebay@gmail.com, info, love, LUVBAY @gmail.com. Or you can text us at 437-778-3299. 437-778-3299. You'd think by now I would have memorized that number. I still haven't. I always still have to look at it. We had Family Day on February 19th. Family Day is a federal holiday here in Canada. I guess the government decided we're not spending enough time with our families, and they gave us Family Day, which is a day when we're, like it implies, where we're supposed to spend time with our families, catch up, have fun, rest, relax, and bond. I hope people got to do that on February 19th. And because of that, we skipped a week. So we are back. We are back with more questions and comments and suggestions from listeners, as always, from around the globe. Again, something I find really affirming, that people around the world are listening into Mental Health Hour and listening into Love Bay Radio and connecting, and there's no borders, only airwaves, and we get to encourage each other. We get to share wisdom and knowledge, understanding, celebrate, and just spend some time together on Love Bay Radio. So I encourage you, whenever you have some free time and you're tired of Netflix and Prime Video and all that, log into Love Bay Radio. There's always something good and interesting going on. Without wasting more time, I am going to go to the questions, comments that we received recently. And let's see, I'll start with the furthest, which I'm not sure which is further, from Brazil, Finland, or from Ontario, Finland or Brazil. But we'll start in Brazil. And this listener says, I am an emotional eater and would like to know how to handle emotional eating. I eat to relieve life stresses and traumas. So this is a listener in Brazil who says they are an emotional eater, which means they eat whenever they're feeling overwhelmed by their emotions, whether it's to relieve stress or traumas. Some emotional eaters eat out of boredom, and yes, boredom is a feeling, it's an emotion that once you start thinking and thinking and thinking about it, becomes a feeling. So even boredom can cause people to eat, loneliness. Um, so emotional eaters are those who will grab the nearest thing, and often it's not healthy. I've never heard someone saying, when I'm feeling emotional, I eat lots and lots of strawberries, or I eat lots and lots of blueberries, or I eat lots and lots of bananas. It's usually junk food, it's usually unhealthy food, it's usually food that we really should consume at a controlled rate. But when we talk about emotional eating, that aspect of control has flown out the window. Our emotions control how much of whatever it is we consume. And really, emotional eating is not that different from other conditions like alcoholism, where people will drink excessively. They can binge drink, or they can drink consistently to relieve stress and traumas and boredom and loneliness and all of those things. People start to drink excessively. And emotional eating kind of works the same way. And that's why you find that some of the approaches that work for addiction also work for emotional eating. There's something called Alcoholics Anonymous. It is a global thing. And the anonymous thing is just basically your confidentiality and privacy is protected. It doesn't mean you have to hide your face when you go to a meeting. There's others there. You get to know them. They have what they call sponsors, which is someone who has been through the journey a little bit longer with you, has gained some wisdom that they can share with you. So that's a sponsor. But in Alcoholics Anonymous, what those same I'll say coping mechanisms and competencies and skills that are learned to combat alcoholism. We also have Eaters Anonymous, and because the same methods of treatment for alcoholism, substance abuse, addiction, different types of addiction also work for emotional eating. Because what it is what it is it's the emotions, and we all try and cope one way or the other. And most of us will look for something that distracts us from that emotion. So we will drink, we will use drugs, we will eat, we will indulge excessively in sex, in gambling, in shopping. It's all more or less the same thing. It's about not being able, first of all, to regulate our emotions. Secondly, to control our reactions to those emotions. And thirdly, we haven't learned coping skills. And that's why therapy is important. So if you're an emotional eater, if you are addicted to anything, or you have lost control over your emotions and the way you respond to them, some people get into a lot of debt, shopping, expensive stuff, spending thousands a month for the same reasons. It's all about our emotions. And so emotional regulation is something that's really important. And we've talked about it in the past. Emotional regulation is how you learn to control your emotions, not to suppress them, because suppressing is bad, controlling is good. Sometimes we talk about controlling emotions as suppressing emotions. Please don't interchange those words, because suppressed emotions are emotions we push down and try and ignore and act like they're not there. And so we start eating, we start drinking, we start fornicating and adulterating, we start shopping, we start gambling, we start self harming as well, because we're trying to suppress our emotions. Emotions are not supposed to be suppressed, but they should be controlled. They should be regulated. Okay. So to that listener, I can't get in too deep. And I'm sure over the weeks, if you keep listening, this topic will keep coming up because it does. And you will learn more about emotional eating. And really, the underlying thing is that emotional regulation. A lot of your issues, if you're short tempered, if you're even depressive and anxious, and a lot of it comes down to learning emotional regulation. How do I regulate my emotions? How do I control my emotions? Not suppress them, but control them. How do I express them in an assertive and healthy way? And here we're talking about in relationships, so that your needs get met if they're not being met. But it's really about emotional regulation. That's the place to start. Okay, so that's to our listener from Brazil. I hope the little bit that I've said will be helpful and maybe point you in the right direction. Then let's go to Helsinki, Finland. And I've been to Helsinki, Finland some years ago. Um, can't say it was a beautiful place. I remember it was cold and damp, but the people were so lovely and so friendly. And the one thing I really liked about being in Helsinki, in Finland, was, as someone who's lactose intolerant, I had so many options. That's one place where they've really catered for those of us who have lactose intolerance. It was just lovely. So here's to Helsinki. Okay, so this listener in Helsinki says, please expand on codependency in a relationship. And I will definitely be doing that, because we're going to continue on that discussion after I've gone through all of our messages here. So keep listening. We will talk some more about codependency. Let's go to Sacramento, California. That's another place where I've been. I loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it. Sacramento it was so much fun being in Sacramento. I really enjoyed myself there. And this listener in Sacramento, California says, I would like to suggest a segment on pathological and codependent pathological persons in general terms. We are talking about codependency. Adding the word pathological does not necessarily change what we've been discussing, because that's exactly what we've been discussing. And just an FYI here on Love Bay's Mental Health Hour, we are generally discussing pathology. And that's why I always say some of these words and terms that we've co-opted into pop psychology, and like we will talk about, oh, that guy's a pathological liar. And what that essentially means is they lie to the extent that somebody can diagnose them with something. That's what a pathological liar is. It's basically saying their lying is due to some underlying psychological condition. So when we talk about pathology or pathological anything, what we're basically looking at is mental health disorders, psychological disorders, clinical disorders. So adding pathological there doesn't change the codependency that we've been discussing, because we've been discussing pathological codependency, not pop psychology codependency. So anytime you see that word pathological, not the way pop psychology has used and abused it, but when you're talking in clinical terms, pathological means if you open the diagnostic manual, you can pinpoint what this problem is. There's some clinical issue behind that, okay? All right, so that's Sacramento, California. Let's come back here home to Ontario. Okay, North Bay. Have I been to North Bay? No, I have not been to North Bay, Ontario yet. I'm sure I will at some point. And this listener in North Bay says, How do you, or what is the best way to transform your anxiety about life in general into a place of strength and calm? So, this listener in North Bay is asking about living an anxious life and how to transform your life from one of anxiety to one of strength and calm. And again, start with emotional regulation. People, I cannot emphasize how important it is to learn to regulate your emotions. That's still something I struggle with in certain areas of my life, because it's something that it doesn't come naturally to most of us. It does not come naturally to most of us. When we are babies, when we're born, and I think I've said this before, we're basically wild animals. We have instincts and we act on them. When a baby feels like crying, it doesn't think like, how will my crying impact my neighbor, my mother, the cat and the dog and the mice in the basement. The baby just cries. It's instinct. It feels something, it acts on it. But as we get older, through socialization, through maturity, through wisdom, and all of that, we learn how to regulate our emotions. So now at the age of 14, you might still be more prone to crying than a 24-year-old or 34-year-old or 44-year-old, but you should not still be crying like a baby. That doesn't mean crying is a bad thing. Please understand what I'm talking about here is emotional regulation, and that's all emotions. I personally do not believe, I'll say personally and professionally, do not believe there is a bad emotion, whether it's anger, whether it's whatever it is. No emotion is bad. What makes it seem like it's bad is the way we express it. And often the way we express our emotions, whatever they might be, depends on how we have mastered emotional regulation. I could be so happy, I start screaming and shouting, and I'm happy, but I'm disturbing my neighbors, I'm being rude and inconsiderate. And there's nothing wrong with being happy, but it's the way I express it. I could be so angry, and I'm screaming and shouting. And there's nothing wrong with being angry. It's how I express it. So our emotions are not bad. Even anxiety is not bad. Anxiety is a survival mechanism. When you start feeling anxious, that's your body and mind telling you something is wrong. So again, you're not trying to suppress emotions, but you do need to learn how to regulate them. All emotions. And regulating is in a large part about how you express them, how you share them, how you cope if it's something that is devastating, if it is something that is overwhelming, all of that. These are all emotions, but it's how you express them. And you want to learn how to express your emotions and share your emotions in a healthy, safe, assertive way. So if you feel that my life has just been one huge ball of anxiety and I want to be in a place of strength and calm, start by learning how to regulate your emotions. And when we're teaching young people, and here I'm talking like in the clinic, when we're teaching young people, children, emotional regulation, one of the first things we teach them is how to identify their emotions. Like some of us don't know if we're feeling angry, if we're feeling overwhelmed, if we're feeling we just know we don't like the way we're feeling, so we lash out. But even being able to articulate starts with being able to identify. And part of identifying that emotion is also what has caused it or what has triggered it, if it's a case of triggering. So, to our listener in North Bay, start with mastering emotional regulation. And this is an ongoing journey. Sometimes you'll do well, sometimes it feels like you need to go for remedial classes. When I was growing up back home in Zimbabwe, we had what we called remedial classes. And this was if you're in class every day and you're not doing well in your mathematics, your whatever, science, whatever it is, they'll sign you up for remedial classes so that you can catch up and do better and fix whatever is making you fail. So if you need to keep going back to those remedial classes to learn how to regulate your emotions, do it. There is no shame in growing as a human being. There's no shame at all. And shame on anyone who shames you for wanting to grow. And often it's people in codependent relationships. And we'll get to that very, very soon. Okay. So I hope that that was helpful. Um, We're going to go to Toronto, and this is from Anonymous in Toronto who says, Dr. Tapo, I've listened to lots of podcasts regarding the pandemic and its effects on people, adults, seniors, marriages, and businesses. Will anyone address how the awful pandemic affected young children? Hopefully you can be the change agent for this important topic. So I'm not sure what change exactly I'm supposed to be an agent of, but I do appreciate you writing in and reminding us that our little ones were also impacted by the pandemic. I do want to say, though, that children are resilient and a lot more adaptive than most of us adults and seniors. And this is not to say they were not impacted at all. They absolutely were. We will be discovering the impacts of it for years to come. And that's the thing. We haven't quite grasped exactly how the pandemic has changed us as society and as individuals. I know for myself that since the pandemic, my memory is really, really bad, like really, really bad. I also noticed that I got used to spending a lot of time alone and in silence. And although I like being around people, I don't like being around people for too long, definitely not crowds. And maybe some of these things were already there inside of me before the pandemic, but the pandemic definitely exacerbated that. And whether it's good or bad, I know and I've noticed some differences in me since the pandemic. And we all have to do this work for ourselves and for our loved ones, for each other. So, yes, definitely, let's watch out for our little ones. Let's be attentive and aware of how they might have been impacted. But also, let's not pathologize them. Let's go back to that word pathology. Let's not pathologize them. And by this, what I mean is some kids honestly really bounced back, and that's good. And we should encourage that. Let's not be quick to pathologize things, especially if we have not yet understood them. So let's start first by understanding the impact. So thank you to this listener in Toronto for bringing it up. I think as a society, as parents, as educators and clinicians, whatever our role is in society, we owe it to each other to find out who was impacted, how they were impacted, and how we can support them and help them. Is it going to be my role? Most likely not. I'm not exposed to enough children to be doing that work. But if there's somebody out there that can pick up the baton, please do. Okay. And then now we're in Scarborough. Scarborough, for those of you outside of Canada and the Ontario province, Scarborough is a city in Ontario, and it's part of what we call the Greater Toronto Area, the GTA. And this reader from Scarborough, oh my goodness, says there seems to be a lack of boundaries with some of my wife's family. Her sisters and mother always seem to be the neighborhood shopping and just pop in. This is very annoying. I know it is a West Indian, Caribbean thing, but we live in Canada and they need to understand boundaries. Addressing this with my wife is like talking to a brick wall. Okay, so I, I feel like I've lost count of the number of husbands, especially complaining about this. Their wives' mothers, their wives' friends, their wives' siblings. We've had a number of husbands write in and complain about boundaries being violated by their wives' family. And I'm just going to be honest here. Why is it a problem? I don't get it. If they're staying too late, if they're still there, it's 1 a.m. and you and your wife should have been in bed 4 hours ago, I get it. If they're knocking at your door at 6 a.m. and you are just waking up, I get it. But I'm trying to understand, why is this a problem? As someone who lives 3,000 miles away from my own mother, my sister, my siblings, I am very isolated. And for those of us who've grown up in other parts of the world, it's one of the things we miss the most. Neighbors that drop in, relatives that drop in, friends that drop in. We had social lives. And we come to Canada and winter is like we're hibernating like bears. You hardly see anyone. You get up in the morning, you go to work, you come back home. If you have children and a spouse or a partner or even a cat and a dog, you are absolutely blessed, because there's people who don't have those things. They left everyone back home. So I think some of these things that we're seeing as violations of boundaries are honestly blessings. And sometimes the things that make us crabby should make us grateful. So to the listener in Scarborough, maybe I need more information, like where's the boundary here? Is it that, are they there every day, not leaving? Are they eating all your food and never bring a loaf of bread? Like, what is it? I really want to understand this. And you're saying it's a West Indian, Caribbean thing. So to me, it's implying that this is part of your woman's culture, your wife's culture. And you married her and now wanted to be, I, I don't know. I won't even say Canadian, because really, what is Canadian? Canada is a country that has so many immigrants from so many different cultures. To say something is Canadian, just to me, honestly, makes absolutely no sense. And usually, when we say it's Canadian, we're saying it's white. Are you expecting your wife to have that Eurocentric culture of you need to call first? You need to make an appointment. If that's not her culture and that's not where she's from, and you married her and now want to isolate her, limit her social life with her family, that's not a boundaries issue. That's a control issue. That's a control issue. Maybe I'm misunderstanding something, but like, listen, to those husbands and spouses and whoever, what is the issue here? Help me understand. Is it the frequency? because I don't see anything wrong with that. And maybe I'm talking as someone who, honestly, I wish I had that. I absolutely wish I had that. My sister dropping in whenever she feels like it, my mom dropping in whenever she feels like, because life is short. Life is short. And sometimes those people that we're trying to push out of our lives are gone suddenly and too soon. And then what? What matters? What matters to you? And if this makes your wife happy, why is it annoying you? I think I need more detail from our listener in Scarborough, because to be honest, what I'm reading right now just looks like some Eurocentric, almost racist kind of stuff. Like, come on. It's a West Indian, Caribbean thing, but we live in Canada, really? So when we come to Canada, we should shed our cultures, our values that are not from Canada, and which ones are we supposed to take up? Listen, maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but I need more information. To me, it just sounds like a control thing. And good on your wife for bringing a brick wall around this. We need our family while we still have them. Okay, so that's me. And we started talking about codependency, and a number of the messages we just received there wanted us to keep talking about codependency. So just a quick recap. We started talking about relationships. We started talking about the factors that impact our mental health. And one of them is social, and relationships fall under the social. So we're looking at codependent relationships. And I think it was last year or maybe the year before. Honestly, I feel like I've been doing mental health hour for a while now. I forget when I spoke about what. But some time ago, I went through personality disorders. We talked about narcissism. We talked about borderline personality disorder. We talked about antisocial personality disorder. I did not talk about the dependent personality disorder. And I'm talking about it now because a lot of people with this personality disorder are in codependent relationships. So when we talk about pathological dependency and codependency, this is what we're talking about: a dependency personality disorder. Now, what is that? People who have this disorder present in certain ways. These are the people we'll say are clingy, don't have boundaries, are passive, are people pleasers, easily manipulated and taken advantage of. They lack assertiveness. They also tend to end up in abusive relationships, and it takes them a lot longer to realize and understand and move away from harm and threats to their safety, because they're so focused on this relationship and start to feel that they cannot do without it. So they put everything in this relationship in an unhealthy way. The key here is healthy, right? We're talking about mental health. So we're talking about an unhealthy relationship pattern or type called codependency. So dependent personality disorder is what we are looking at today, and looking at what it looks like in relationships. Now, you might have two codependent people in a relationship, but more often than not, it's one codependent person who ends up with a narcissistic type person. Why? Because narcissists love to manipulate, love to use, love to abuse. Now, narcissism clinically is also a pathology. So narcissists are people too, and they deserve love too. And I'm not saying if you're married or in a relationship or are raising a narcissist, yes, somebody raised that narcissist that ruined your life. Before they ruined your life, they had a parent who, I don't want to blame the parent, but a lot of behaviors are learned and nurtured and encouraged within the home setting, which is where a child first gets socialized. So somebody raised that narcissist just as somebody raised that dependent person. Now, I said last time, there's nothing wrong with being dependent. Nobody should go through life saying, I'm independent, I don't need anybody, I don't trust anybody, I don't. That's not what we're getting at. Dependency is good in a healthy relationship and in a healthy way. Remember, last time I said when we're born, again, going back to those little wild animals we call babies, they're born into the world, cannot speak, cannot walk, cannot even hold something for a while. So they're 100% dependent on their caregiver, 100%. But as they grow and as they socialize and as they become more human than animal, they become a little more independent. And that comes with age, it comes with skills, it comes with wisdom and maturity and education and all of that. You get to a point where you are still dependent on other human beings. Think about it. If you're in a healthy romantic relationship right now, you depend on your partner, and that's good. It's not okay, it's actually good in a healthy relationship. But with the codependent personality disorder, there is no healthy about it. There is no healthy about it. And these people tend to attract people who will manipulate and abuse that disorder in them. They attract people with antisocial personality disorders. They attract people with narcissistic disorders. They attract people who are mean, cruel, abusive, all of that. Because, and I say this because if you are a healthy, kind human being, you would find it very, very difficult to be in a codependent relationship. Very, very difficult. Because basically you're in a relationship with somebody who's not healthy. And I've said this before. Even those of you who want to love someone back to health, it's all good and fine and all of that. But if a person is unhealthy, you will never have a healthy relationship. You might be, but you will find yourself overburdened by certain things. And the reality is, a lot of us are in relationships with unhealthy people. I'm not saying break up, I'm saying do the work. Do the work. I myself, I'm a clinician, I've been doing this work for a long time. I still have a lot of growing to do. And I see that in my different relationships. And that's important. You have to see it and then do something about it. But with the codependent people, just like with other personality disorders, which is the antisocial, the narcissistic, the borderline personality disorder, we have histrionic, we have paranoid personality disorders, we have obsessive compulsive, and it takes a while for them to realize something's wrong here and I need help. It takes some time, right? But once you've realized, and normally the way we realize this is by noticing patterns. It happened once, it happened twice, it happened 3 times. Listen, by the time it's happening for the 4th time, you should be able to see that, okay, something's wrong here. Something's wrong here, and I need to introspect and do some work. Some of us repeat, like we've had some people write in and say, I always attract this kind of man. What's wrong with me? Why do all my relationships end up like this? Because you're not doing the work. But good for you that you've noticed this has happened to you too many times and there's something wrong. Do the work, get help. So, codependent. What do they do that we can, oh, this is codependent. People pleasing, that's number 1. You know deep in your heart that this is not right, this is not good. No, but you'll smile and nod your head and go along with it. To your own detriment, to the detriment of whoever it is you're trying to please, to the detriment of the world. The world will burn to ashes just so you can please someone. And why are you people pleasing? Because you are afraid that if I don't do or say what they want me to do or say, they will leave me, they will abandon me, then what will I do? See, that's where that dependency come in. We're so dependent, so caught up in this relationship, we will do anything to hold on to it. Even those things that we know we should not, those things that are dangerous, that are destructive, that are unhealthy. So people pleasing. Like I said, the world will burn to ashes around you, and you'll still be smiling and acting like it's okay because you do not want to risk upsetting that person. And do you see why narcissists would love that relationship? Because they'll get their way every single time. Every single time. So if you're a people pleaser and you feel like you have no choice but to do what people want and to please them, do the work. Learn to say no, learn assertiveness, learn boundaries, learn self-advocacy, learn values, do the work. So lack of boundaries, that's the other thing in codependent relationships. And this thing, boundaries. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a conference with young people, and what I realized at this conference is boundaries is another one of those co-opted terms that pop psychology has completely just illegitimized. I'll say it that way. I was going to use a bad word, but because most people think boundaries are setting the rules of your relationship, and if a person doesn't like those rules, then I'm going to cancel them. That's not what boundaries are. That is not what boundaries are. That is not what boundaries are for. I had young people saying, you don't compromise on your boundaries. I'm like, how are you in a relationship where you have not discussed your boundaries, come to an understanding, compromised when necessary, so that you have a healthy relationship? Instead, you're going into these relationships with all these rules. Thou shalt not, and thou shalt not, and if thou do, then goodbye. That's not boundaries. That is not boundaries. And the people who often get caught up, like, and I'm talking about this from, like, that guy talked about pathological codependency within the context of pathology and dependency. People with borderline personality disorder struggle so much with boundaries. They either use them as weapons or erase them completely. But boundaries are really, really important in a healthy relationship. And boundaries, you have to know and understand what boundaries are. One young woman kept talking, and like, she almost argued with me about, why should I tell people my boundaries? I'm like, but how are you going to cancel a person for violating boundaries you never talked about in the first place? Listen, it is not people's jobs to know your boundaries. Communicate your boundaries, clearly label them. This is my boundary. This is our boundary within the context of our relationship. Let's talk about it. Let's agree on it. And sometimes, and I gave an example, boundaries change and evolve with your relationship. That's why you need to learn to talk about boundaries. Some of us talk more about our neighbors. You have so much time to gossip and tell each other the latest in your relationship, but you've never discussed boundaries. You need to talk about your boundaries. You need to clarify your boundaries. And you need to respect those boundaries. And if a boundary is violated, don't be so quick to shut people out, cut them out of your life. I read somewhere that Gen Z is turning out to be the loneliest generation yet. And you know why? Cancel culture. Gen Z are quick to cut you out of their lives. You violated my boundaries. Yeah, I never talked to you about those boundaries. I'm not even clear what my boundaries are, but I know you violated one. I'm never talking to you again. Before you know it, you have no friends. Trust is an issue in your relationships, and you're going from one person to the other, and people start to notice it. So they start to mistrust you and avoid you because you don't seem to be a loyal person. Discuss your boundaries, respect boundaries, but also important is loyalty, communication, mutuality, forgiveness, and grace. Oh my goodness, we do not forgive enough anymore. Grace is something we just don't seem to give each other anymore. We're so quick to cancel people, and we're becoming lonely. Our relationships are becoming toxic because we keep talking about boundaries we have not talked about, we have not identified, and we don't even know how to maintain. So again, folks, do the work, do the work. So in codependent relationships, boundaries are an issue. There's a lack of boundaries. Having boundaries simply means that you respect the other person's right to his or her own feelings and autonomy. That's one. And this is within the context of codependent relationships. There are lots of definitions and ways you can define and explain and unpack boundaries. But what I'm doing right now is within the context of codependency and how we can start. If you're in a codependent relationship, I'm not saying break up unless there's some kind of physical, mental, and emotional abuse, and you are really, really suffering and unsafe. If not, you both can go for couples counseling And listen, couples counseling is not only for married couples. It's for people who are dating. It's for a mother and daughter. It's for a father and son. It's for a mother and son. It's for you and your sibling. Couple simply means two people. And if you're having issues with boundaries with someone in your life that matters to you, that is important to you, the two of you can go. I've had therapy with mothers and their daughters. I've had therapy with mothers and their sons. I've had therapy with siblings, even. Couple just means two people. And if you're having a hard time establishing, maintaining, negotiating, understanding boundaries in your relationship with whoever, go for therapy, do the work. In the context of codependent relationships, boundaries is about you have your feelings, I have mine. You're autonomous, so am I. I will express my feelings in an assertive way without fear that you will abandon me, you will cancel me. And that's the other thing about this cancel culture that has developed. People are becoming people pleasers because they are afraid. If I am honest with my feelings, this person will cancel me. They've already been canceled 5, 6 times. So now they don't share their feelings because we're going on social media and everyone on social media is now a guru. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I said to some young people recently, listen, stop going on Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok, wherever, and you read the text of some bitter person, absolutely bitter and resentful, and they're telling you life lesson out of their bitterness, and you take this and now you're living your life in a very bitter way, being bitter to all your parents, your siblings, your family, the dog, cat, and the mice in the basement, because you're following bitter people and swallowing their bitter pills and thinking that's what it is. Some of these bitter people are so articulate and eloquent and convincing, but it doesn't change the fact that they're bitter. Sis, if your man does blah, 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 it's time to walk away, because she just walked away last week. And you're thinking, oh, yeah, my husband did that 2 weeks ago. I'm out. I'm just saying, like, those posts you see, you don't have enough context to know where they came from and what is driving that person's life lesson, word of wisdom, whatever it is. You do not have enough context to be organizing your life around people's posts on social media. Unless that person sits down and tells you their life story, where they were born, how they were born, what they had for dinner 3 weeks ago, 3 months ago, 3 years ago, who cooks in their family, this, and you have the complete context, then maybe you can apply it to your life. But too many of us applying things to our lives from bitter, resentful, angry, lonely, attention seeking people. And we're taking this as how we should live. And it's not just young people that are doing this. I was thinking about it when I read the listener was saying we need to talk about how the pandemic impacted young people or children. And that just kind of, for me, um, sparked a thought around social media. And some of us, we're not kids anymore. In fact, we're raising kids. But we're spending so much time on social media. We're not paying enough attention to our children. Mommy's doing her Instagram. Just give me a second. Daddy has to record this. Just give me a second. And next thing you know, that child is on social media. Oh, smile for the gram, do this for Instagram, for this. And like, we're teaching our children that what really matters is what's on social media. We, the grown-ups, the adults, the parents, are spending as much time on there, applying as much of this wacky wisdom from social media in our parenting, in our daily lives. Our children, our young people think that's where it's at, but it's not. Social media, there's good and bad in it. And we need to be able to weigh the difference. Is this good? Is this bad? Are you paying enough attention to your children, to your partners and spouses, even to yourself? You come home from work, you plonk onto the sofa and you start scrolling. Next thing, it's 9 p.m. So you stretch, get up and go eat dinner. You're eating dinner at 10. Come on, like, our lives are lacking balance. Our lives are lacking balance. And we're seeing that in spiked mental health rates, in lowering self-esteem, in broken and toxic relationships. We're not doing the work anymore. Where you get into a fight argument, you go and look for answers on social media. Therapy is expensive. I get it. It's expensive. I understand. And sometimes what we're seeing on social media seems to be speaking directly to us. But it's not all wisdom. And it's not the solutions we need. I got a little bit out of topic here because this is just something I'm super passionate about. I'm seeing a lot of this, a lot of it. Cancel culture, as they're calling it. Relationships made toxic because we're not talking anymore. We're scrolling and then reacting. We're not relating the way we should on a very real and authentic and human space. Not on social media. Not on social media. Like, I don't know if I'm speaking to anyone right now, like, but folks, I can't say it enough. I cannot say it enough. We need to do the work. We need to get professional help. We need to stop going on social media for solutions to problems that we have not even reflected on properly. Something happens and we're already scrolling, we're looking for, oh, so and so said, and this person said, and we're getting answers to questions we should not be asking in the first place. This is Love Bay Mental Health Hour. Get in touch, 437-778-3299, or email us at infolovebay@gmail.com. We'll continue talking about codependent relationships. I got a little off track there because I was at this conference, and to be honest with you, listening to all these beautiful young people, passionate people, but wondering, like, oh my goodness, if this is what it is, what will it be in 10 years? if we are getting all of our wisdom from posts, and most times we don't even know who created that post. We don't. But we're taking them as words to live by. And we're letting them control our relationships, our attitudes, our mindsets. And we end up alone, confused, hurting, traumatized because of social media, which really, really, really should just be entertainment at the most. A few weeks ago, when I was talking about the factors that impact our mental health, I included social, which includes what we consume. And our consumption of social media is toxic, unhealthy, pathological, for sure. Our time is up. I will end my rant there, and I will continue on codependency, and hopefully next time I will actually go through it and not get sidetracked. Please get in touch, send your questions, send your comments, share your wisdom with a little more context, because that's why I keep saying some of these questions and comments you're sending, I need more for context, because some of these things, when I read them, I'm like, boundaries or control? What's the issue here? So please get in touch. Let me see if I can remember it. 437-778-3299, or email infolovebay@gmail.com. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the rest of Black History Month. If you're here in North America, enjoy the rest of February, and take care of each other with compassion and grace. We need more grace for ourselves and for the people around us. Let's be gracious and grateful, actually. Okay, I'll end here because I can keep going. Good night, folks.